Here it is, the moment we've all been waiting for. The video where I review Season 1 of Invincible. Now, the premise of the show, I've kind of already gone over it in previous videos, but if you're not aware, Invincible is a adult animation streamed off of the Amazon Prime streaming services, and it's basically a superhero show that takes superheroes and reinvents it. I went on a whole long Why is Invincible peak. If you want to watch that video, I'm sure you can find it on my channel. I didn't post it too long ago, so it's definitely there. But Invincible itself is fantastic. The first episode opens up, and you see Omni-Man fighting, and he is helping out in a sense. And then all of a sudden, spoiler alert, by the way, all of a sudden, I would say about 15 minutes into the first episode, Omni-Man turns his back on the heroes he was helping in the beginning. He then kills the Guardians of the Globe. Now, the Guardians of the Globe are basically this universe's Justice League. You've got basically, Martian Man, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash. You've basically got all of them just with different names, costumes, and personas. But Omni-Man doesn't care, and he absolutely wipes out all of them. This is kind of the first instance where you realize that this isn't going to be a normal superhero show, because superheroes don't kill. Superheroes have never killed. It isn't a thing that people associate with superheroes nowadays. Superheroes are supposed to save the villain from himself, in a sense. But in the show Invincible, you learn really fast that people are allowed to get hurt. People are allowed to die. And that almost creates a whole nother element to the show that people don't necessarily expect in a superhero show. So the other notable event that happens kind of ties into one of my underlying themes, which is like a coming-to-age story. Mark gets his powers. You're introduced to also Mark Grayson in the first episode, and he's at work throwing some trash away, and all of a sudden he feels like and he gets his powers. He launches a trash bag pretty much into space with the force of 1,000 gods. He's happy, he's excited, he has finally, quote-unquote, hit superhero puberty and has become a superhero, something his dad has been waiting a long time to happen. And then episode 1 pretty much comes to a close, and you get to episode 2. Episode 2, titled Here Goes Nothing, kind of focuses on Mark's first instance as Invincible. He picks his suit, he picks his name, and he becomes the show-titled superhero Invincible. Now, his first suit is ass, and he doesn't necessarily stay long, but that's a different story for a later season. Let's see. Teen Team is also introduced, and that's where you kind of get a first look at Rexplode and Adam Eve. Two important characters that will definitely get some love in at least the season 2 and season 3 video, maybe not the season 1 video. They don't really get developed as characters. The show is still kind of introducing you to everything, still trying to get you used to Mark Grayson being your protagonist, being your main character, being the guy you want to care about. In season 2, you also get to introduced to the Flaxons. The Flaxons are kind of this random point in episode 2 that is like, okay, they're just invading for what? They're just invading for why? It's just kind of like this filler moment in the second episode almost, because the Flaxons don't end up being really all that important, in my opinion. Another notable event is they start looking into who killed the Guardians of the Globe. The show lets you know early that Omni-Man does not want to be caught because, he's a foreign alien from a different planet, and, you kill the Earth's greatest superheroes, you're going to face some backlash. You're going to face some heavy heat. Now, later on in the series, it will tell you why he kills them, but this is the first part where the main, I wouldn't say he's the main antagonist, but Cecil Stedman kind of starts to introduce the investigation on why I just said their name, but why those superheroes were killed by Omni-Man. Now, he doesn't know, like I said, that they were killed by Omni-Man, but he starts to look into it and starts to kind of put pieces together. And those are kind of all the notable events. I did want to take a second and say that if you see me looking at my phone, it's because I got notes on my phone. I rewatched all of season 1, 2, and 3 and just kind of took notes, kind of made talking points. There's a lot to go over, so got to forgive me. My brain can't do it all at once. Episode 3, Who You Callin' Ugly, probably has to be one of my favorite episodes of season 1. Granted, anything past 6 is 7, 8, and 9 are pretty solid. I like them a lot. But for episode 3, it kind of introduces you to Omni-Man's true means, I guess. True reason for being on Earth. You see him annihilate an alien planet. Now, if that's not foreshadowing, I don't know what is. Because when you first begin to watch episode 3, you still don't know why Omni-Man necessarily came to Earth. But when he goes and destroys this alien planet, it is the first kind of instance that you realize that, okay, maybe everything isn't panning out to be what it seems. And this is the first time that you kind of get introduced to Damien Darkblood as well. This kind of ties into the episode 2 where Cecil Stedman starts to investigate the murders. And it introduces you to Damien Darkblood, this hell creature who has been let out of hell to serve a purpose. And, at any point, he can be sent back. It explains more of that later on. But all you should know for episode 3 is that Damien Darkblood is investigating Omni-Man. He suspects that Omni-Man is the one that killed them. And as we all know, he did. So, episode 4, some of the biggest moments from there. Neil Armstrong, Eat Your Heart Out is what the episode is titled. It's kind of like a filler episode. It kind of is like a setup episode. It kind of sets some things up to happen later on in the series. You see Mark go to Mars, his first off-world mission. He's excited. It's the first time Earth has really counted on him. You also see what happens on Mars. There is a space alien creature kind of thing. I don't necessarily remember the names of them, but a U.S. astronaut gets one of these things on his face, and basically they're a hive mind creature. So once one of them gets a host, they all have a host, and then they all become like one big brain now that they've had this host, and they become 1,000 times more dangerous. So basically, a human astronaut fucks up on Mars, and now you've got to deal with this later on in the season. It doesn't necessarily resolve right away, but it does get a resolution at the end of the season, and it's pretty nice. Then you go into episode 5, titled That Actually Hurt. And this is where you get a second look at the Mahler twins. The Mahler twins were characters introduced earlier in the season. They weren't necessarily super important, but this is where you get a kind of a second look at them. They come back. They have a little bit of a bigger part. They kind of begin to become a side character in my head. They established that they're going to have a presence throughout the show, that they're going to have a presence throughout the seasons to come. The Mahler twins have actually become one of my all-time favorite duo. They're voiced by one person, and quite honestly, he does a great job making them two separate characters, although they are constantly one of their own. You also get to see Invincible's first encounter with death. The first time he fights Battle Beast straight up fucking murks him. Like, straight up brings this man to the finish line of death. Like, if Mark were to have been pushed one more inch, Mark would have died. Battle Beast beats the fuck out of him. You kind of see it happen. Invincible teams up with this kind of vigilante character almost. He's represented as. You later find out that that's not the case at all, but he teams up with this guy named Titan. Titan's whole thing is he's trying to get out of this violent criminal gang boss life. He says, hey, Invincible, come help me deal with my boss. I'm trying to get out. He won't let me leave. help me deal with this problem, So that's where Invincible finds himself getting his ass whipped by Battle Beast. But I feel like I had to explain that. But the battle with Battle Beast himself is super important because it's the first time, like I mentioned, that Mark quite literally almost dies. And this is the first kind of time where you have realized that people are allowed to get hurt, but this is the first time you realize that anyone is allowed to get hurt. Not just random civilians and encounters along the street. Mark Grayson got his shit stomped, and now he's lying in the GDF hospital. It's a sight to see. And that's kind of where episode 6 begins. And I would say once episode 6 starts, it kind of turns into a more entertaining story because they're starting to wrap up the first season. They are 3 episodes away from the finale, and they want to get the ball moving on the story. Episode 6, you see this character named D.A. Sinclair. D.A. Sinclair is kind of a daddy's boy. He's kind of daddy's money. I'm rich, you're not. Get over it. I'm going to flaunt my money at any given opportunity. Now, D.A. Sinclair's problem is that he thinks he is above the law. He thinks he is so smart that he is just allowed to do whatever he wants, regardless of the consequences. And that causes him to kind of start experimenting on college students, particularly college students he doesn't like. But while that is a big detail, it is kind of one of the more minor ones. D.A. Sinclair, the cyborgs he's creating, they have a bigger piece later in the season, but it shows you that D.A. Sinclair is the one behind these robots. Again, Mark looks healed, but in episode 6, Mark gets beat up again. That's a recurring theme. It's not like a super important theme, but Mark likes to get his ass kicked. So the more I talk about Invincible getting his ass kicked over these next couple of videos, just know it constantly happens. He's constantly growing from it, and then he constantly gets into a fight with somebody bigger and badder than him. And every single time I'm invested in Mark Grayson. That's just how good this show is. Another big thing that happened in episode 6 is Adam Eve breaks off from Teen Team. It's the first time you kind of get a little bit of story about who Adam Eve is, who her character is, who and what she wants to do with her powers. She is so tired of just being this call dog, being this superhero that goes and fights for the world when the world needs it. She wants to help the world. She wants to, help with crops not growing. She wants to help with fires and burning buildings. And she wants to help with restoration of cities. And she wants to help with the general needs of the world and not necessarily the world threats. While she'll still help with the world threats, she's more interested in helping the world become a better place, which is something that I think is a beautiful character arc because it sets Adam Eve up to be a really likable character. Sometimes you can have a hard time getting attached to a protagonist that wants to do the right thing because, who wants to watch somebody do the right thing? It's always more fun watching somebody do the wrong thing. But Adam Eve, the way her story is set up, it almost begins to become this, I can't even find the words for it, but it almost becomes this beautiful journey of self-growth from a dirty past, I would say. Now, I wouldn't say her past is terrible. She's a superhero for Pete's sake. Of course, she's had a decent life. But, her home life isn't the greatest, and I honestly think her dad is a dick. He's kind of one of the minor characters. You see him a lot. He definitely makes a bunch of reappearances, but Adam Eve's dad, let me just get it out there on the line now. I hate his guts. I don't like him at all. But yeah, that's pretty much episode 6. One of my more favorites. And then we jump into episode 7. Episode 7 is really when the season starts to, like I mentioned for episode 6, they wanted to start wrapping it up. And episode 7 is very evident that is their goal. Episode 7, titled We Need to Talk, is the first time that Debbie Grayson, Invincible's mom, Omni-Man's wife, it's the first time that she kind of walks up to Nolan and is like, she suspects that he killed the Guardians, but doesn't necessarily have proof. Doesn't necessarily have proof that Omni-Man is the murderer of the Earth's most beloved heroes, but she also doesn't believe that her husband would lie to her. So that kind of throws her off of the trail just a tiny bit. It starts to develop more and more, and it ends up blowing up at the end of season 1. But another big thing, Omni-Man sends Damian Darkblood back to hell. That is another big thing in episode 7, because Damian Darkblood was getting a little too close to Omni-Man's trail, and Omni-Man didn't like it. So Omni-Man, doing what he always will do, and you will soon learn that there is quite literally not a lot that this man won't do, but there's a lot that he will do, and he doesn't quite give a fuck. He sends Darkblood back to hell, and he kills some GDF agents. The big thing behind him killing the GDF agents is just kind of showing that he doesn't care for human life. That's kind of like the theme developing behind Omni-Man. He doesn't care for the humans on Earth. And that becomes just slightly more evident when he is just slaughtering these agents and sending Damian Darkblood back to hell. And then you also see Omni-Man and Invincible. Not Mark and what's his fucking name? Nolan. Not Mark and Nolan fighting. You see Omni-Man and Invincible almost come out of clash. And that's when that's when the show kind of lets you know that it's getting serious. It's getting to a point where you should pay attention. Episode 8, where I really come from. When I first read the title of this episode, I knew it was going to be good. This is the episode where Omni-Man breaks down and tells Mark the truth. Not the truth on, hey, I cheated on your mom, or hey, I'm not your dad. He tells him the truth on why he's truly on Earth, what the mission of the Viltrumite is. And Omni-Man's mission is that simple. It's to conquer Earth with or without their approval. He wants to conquer Earth and introduce them into this Viltrumite empire that is truly the strongest empire in the nation, simply because they send Viltrumite agents out, like Omni-Man, to destroy planet, or not necessarily destroy them, but to conquer them. But they don't even mind destroying them in the process. If they would rather have a destroyed planet than a planet that isn't under their control. And that's kind of like the first breaking moment where you realize that maybe I don't like Omni-Man that much. Maybe Omni-Man is just this power-hungry piece of shit. But, of course, Mark is like, no, this is my home. This is me. This is mine. I'm here to protect this. These are my friends, my family, my planet. And, of course, Omni-Man doesn't like that. Omni-Man then proceeds to beat the living hell out of Invincible. I mean, absolutely dog walk him. Like, it's not even close. And in the process, they destroy Chicago. They destroy a bunch of things. But more importantly, Invincible's lower jaw gets destroyed. He gets the poop knocked out of him. He gets the pee knocked. Everything. He gets beat the fuck up. And it's quite interesting, honestly. It's quite entertaining. And then it breaks down to Mark lying on the ground, and you can tell he's like, Dad, why are you doing this? And Omni-Man kind of goes on this nice long speech where he's like, what will you have? What will you have when everything is gone? All of that good shit. What will you have? And Mark looks up with a twinkle in his two bloodied, bruised eyes, and he says, I'll have you, Dad. Which kind of causes Nolan, not even Omni-Man, it causes Nolan to come out as Mark's dad. And he kind of relives these baseball memories of Nolan doing good in a sport and being really excited to run up to his parents and tell him. It kind of brings out the humanity in Omni-Man, even though he is 0% human. It kind of shows that maybe there is a good side to him, and maybe you could flip him in the end. But Omni-Man stops beating the hell out of him, flies off into the solar system, and that's kind of the last you hear about him for season 1. Episode 9 doesn't exist. It has a final montage of the season. It kind of wraps up. It kind of shows you the sequids on Mars. That's the little alien hive mind creature that shows up. D.A. Sinclair's Reaniman. That side story of the cyborgs. They show back up. They find out, they shut it all down, and then Cecil Stedman actually hires Sinclair instead of following Mark's advice to jail him, which is a big thing. When Mark finds out, trust me, he's not happy. He actually gets quite pissed. It shows what happened after Mark was carted off to the GDA hospital. It shows Titan taking control of the world that he was once trying to leave. Earlier, he enlisted Invincible's help back when he fought Battle Beast, and it shows now that Titan is taking control of this criminal empire instead of leaving it. It shows that, yes, in fact, he was lying to Mark to get what he wanted. Let's see. The Mahler twins are shown cloning. It shows kind of like more into the whole specific area of them. The Viltrumites, they hear that Omni-Man may have deserted his post. It kind of shows that they're planning a return. They're planning something for Season 2. You're going to get more introduced to a Viltrumite army in Season 2. And then probably my favorite part is when Seth Rogen's character, Alan the Alien, gets introduced. Mark, or Invincible, is told by the GDF that there's something approaching Earth. Something Omni-Man-sized approaching Earth. So, of course, that makes Mark scared, and he flies, well, I wouldn't say scared, ready to fight. Ready to put his life back on the line for planet Earth. So he flies out there, ready to fight, and all of a sudden you meet Seth Rogen's character, Alan the Alien. Alan the Alien is quite literally the guy I would get tattooed. Like, throughout the entire show, I've only fallen more in love with the character of Alan the Alien. Like, he is such a well-written character, and I can't wait to see where they go in Season 4 with him, quite honestly, even though we're talking about Season 1 right now. But Alan the Alien, great character. You're going to learn to love him in Season 2. Pretty much that's kind of all of my notes. To kind of break it more down, the whole season, in my opinion, was kind of along the lines of, a coming-of-age story. Invincible gets his powers, starts fighting, starts becoming a superhero, realizes that this shit is hella hard, and then he gets his ass whooped by his dad. That's kind of like the coming-of-age story. That's the beginning of it. It's the start of who Mark is, what he's gone through so far. Another big thing is betrayal and legacy. It seems to be there was a couple of characters, Titan, Omni-Man, who will betray anyone just to preserve their legacy. In Omni-Man's case, he's betraying his son. He's betraying his wife. He's betraying the people of Earth who he's been defending all of this time. He is doing all of this because he is a Viltrumite. That is his legacy. He has a mission to complete, and by damn is he going to complete it. You also see it in Titan. Titan betrays Mark's trust so that he can take over the criminal underworld, therefore gaining a legacy. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I just scrolled to the bottom of my notes. But yeah, those are pretty much all of my thoughts, all of my thinkings. It overall was a fantastic season. A little slow for some. I do admit I had to start it twice. It's a little sad, but that's just kind of how it happens. But yeah, if you made it this far, I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate you watching. I just really rambled about Invincible Season 1. I went over every episode and said some of my favorite parts, some of the big key moments. Overall, I would give Season 1 of Invincible an 8.2 out of 10. It's not perfect, but damn, is it good. But that's going to be it for me. Be on the lookout for Part 2. I already have the notes typed up. I'll probably be filming it within the next couple days, and then it should be up within next week. As always, this has been The Kevin Show. I appreciate you. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.